So a maker is a company or an organization that has the ability to invest heavily in AI. They do a lot of research and development. They have high risk tolerance, and they are developing these new models, these leading edge research capabilities. And then the takers, to take it to the other extreme, are the companies that are just following their vendors. So they are taking the AI capabilities that are built into the applications that they are already using. So if you are using, for instance, Salesforce as a CRM tool, you already leverage some of the Einstein AI capabilities that are built into Salesforce. Now, the disadvantage of being a taker is that it doesn't give you any competitive advantage because all of your competitors are basically doing the same thing, but at least you are keeping up with your competitors. You may have to do a little bit of effort in terms of establishing governance processes, educating your staff. But other than that, it doesn't take a lot of effort to be a taker. Now, where it gets really interesting is when you decide to be a shaper.
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. My name is Kate vanderVoort, founder and CEO of the AI Success Lab. Today I am joined by David Espindola, futurist, technologist, and author of Soulful, You in the Future of Artificial Intelligence. David has more than 30 years guiding organizations through major waves of technological change. He's the founder of Brainyus and the creator of Conversations with Xena, his podcast where he explores human and AI collaboration with his own AI colleague. In our conversation, David talks through what businesses are getting wrong with AI, the maker, shaper, taker model, and why culture and trust shape whether teams can adopt AI with confidence. We dig into the shifts coming to the workforce, the rise of agentic AI, education's turning point, and what it takes for leaders to bring their people with them. If you're curious about the future of work, the human side of this transformation, and how to use AI with purpose and clarity, this episode will give you plenty to think about. Let's dive right in. Hi, David. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we get started by you telling us a bit about you and Brainyus and how you're working. First, let's start with a bit about your AI journey and how you've gotten to where you are, and then you can dive into more about how you're working with people and businesses at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the technology industry for more than 30 years, and I've been helping clients, customers, and organizations that I've worked for deal with technological change. So this is nothing new to me, but what's new is that this is happening at a much faster speed than we're all used to. And so my journey with AI, I've been using these types of IT systems for quite some time. But with, as you know, the advent of ChatGPT in November of 2022, everything changed, right? So AI used to be a conversation that happened in academia and technology companies, and now everybody's talking about AI. And so I actually started writing about AI about 4 years ago, and I published a book. My first book was called The Exponential Era. And in that book, I talk about not just AI, but several other platforms that are growing exponentially and are converging and are bringing just unprecedented changes to business and society. And out of those 7 or 8 platforms that I talk about in that book, there was one that really stood out to me, and that was AI. And I thought this one is really going to be very powerful. It's going to be transformative. And so I decided to write a book specifically about AI. And my book is called Soulful, You in the Future of Artificial Intelligence. And what this book is about is really how we humans are going to experience this change, how we need to prepare to deal with the change, how we can potentially collaborate with these intelligent machines. And I also dive into a little bit about the deeper questions about, what does it mean to be human? when we now have this other entity that could be just as smart, if not smarter than we are. So I get a little bit into the deeper side of things, but it's really about how it's bringing unprecedented changes to us as society, as businesses.
Oh, I look forward to exploring a whole lot more about all of that. Just a side note, when you were writing that first book, are there other platforms or other technologies that are going to give us, more pause to think and navigate the journey? Or is it really AI is the one that's going to be the major disruptor or transformer over the next decade or more?
Yeah, there are several platforms that are growing exponentially and they're actually converging. So one sort of plays on the other. So the best example is robotics, right? So we're starting to see these humanoid robots that are becoming incredibly capable, that are able to leverage AI to be able to think, to be able to adapt to different environments. And the combination of robotics and AI is going to be absolutely incredible. And then we have things like quantum computing, which will increase the compute power that we need for AI to get to the next level. So all of these platforms converging and bringing just new capabilities that we couldn't even think about how deep these transformations would be just 10, 20 years ago. Things have really happened at a speed that I don't think anybody had expected.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people are facing. And some days it feels a bit like we're frogs in boiling water, that it's happening around us.
Right.
And how quickly we wake up to that, I think, is going to play a big part in how we navigate where we're heading with this technology.
Absolutely.
So that's an enormous breadth of work that you've already undertaken. And obviously you've gone really deep into some of the bigger questions that we're all facing as we go through this transformation or transition. How does all of that fit into your approach when you're working with businesses who are wrestling with AI disruptions?
Right. So when I'm working with businesses, one of the things that I talk to my clients about is just how important it is to develop a well thought out strategy. I have done several projects that indicate that businesses, especially small and medium sized businesses, are really struggling with AI. They don't know where to start. They are afraid of the technology. They struggle with the fear of change and cybersecurity and several other pieces of this puzzle. And so I try to help them in figuring out how to think about the technology and how to fit the technology into a strategy that makes sense for them. Because every company is different, and depending on your risk tolerance, depending on your capabilities, depending on your investment capabilities, you may or may not be able to take advantage of some of the AI tools that are available out there. But everybody can take advantage of AI because we have several things that are available to all of us, free or near free. And so it comes down to deciding what you're going to be. And I'm going to use some terms that came from McKinsey, and they are maker, shaper, or taker. So a maker is a company or an organization that has the ability to invest heavily in AI. They do a lot of research and development. They have high risk tolerance, and they are developing these new models, these leading edge research capabilities. And then the takers, to take it to the other extreme, are the companies that are just following their vendors. So they are taking the AI capabilities that are built into the applications that they are already using. So if you are using, for instance, Salesforce as a CRM tool, you already leverage some of the Einstein AI capabilities that are built into Salesforce. Now, the disadvantage of being a taker is that it doesn't give you any competitive advantage because all of your competitors are basically doing the same thing, but at least you are keeping up with your competitors. You may have to do a little bit of effort in terms of establishing governance processes, educating your staff. But other than that, it doesn't take a lot of effort to be a taker. Now, where it gets really interesting is when you decide to be a shaper. So a shaper is sort of in between being a maker and a taker. So the shaper is the company that has the ability to take a model. It's a most of the time it's a pre-trained model, and then you fine-tune that model to be able to train it in your own language, your own knowledge base, your products, your services, your culture. And it's an AI that's really much more in tune with what you want it to do. And then there's a whole spectrum of techniques that you can take in order to leverage those capabilities. So if you just take that one step and make a decision whether you're going to be a maker, a taker, or a shaper, you're already 90% ahead of most companies. Most companies don't even know that these are, possibilities for them.
It's such a great framework to look at it through, because that's exactly what we're seeing in working with companies and with businesses, and where that true magic happens with AI, particularly in smaller to medium-sized businesses who tend to be a bit more agile, a bit more experimental, maybe not so, constrained by regulatory, influences or by the way things have always been done. Once they get that alignment between them as the business owner, the business products and services, and then the customer with the AI, that's where you really start to see the magic. So if we look at that sort of the role of humans, I guess, in an organization, how do you see that changing as AI becomes more commonplace in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're going to see incredible changes in the workplace as we think about agentic AI, for example. We're creating these agents that are becoming experts in different domains, and that are going to be embedded into workflows in organizations. So I was listening to Anthropic's CEO, and he was saying that he believes that about half of all entry-level jobs are going to be eliminated. So think about the impact that has in an organization, because, as you develop your human resources, you need to have those entry-level jobs. That's where people gain the experience that they need in order to perform higher-level jobs. Now, if you're eliminating half of those jobs, then where are people going to get the experience that they need? So I think there's some really important questions that we as a society, that companies need to be thinking through in terms of what are the changes that AI are going to bring to my organization. How do I prepare? How do I deal with the human side of this equation, the change management side of this equation? We see a lot of fear in the marketplace. People are afraid of AI taking their jobs. So how do we deal with that fear, and how do we provide people with the assurances that they need that this is going to be a positive change for them? And I believe that I tend to lean on the optimistic side of this. And I do believe that overall, AI is going to be a positive change for all of us. But there will be transitions, there will be points of pain, and we need to be ready to deal with those pain points.
Yeah, and that's why that human-centered approach to this is so important, because
Absolutely.
I often say, this isn't a tech transformation. This isn't a technical challenge that we're dealing with. It's really a human one, and
It
how
is.
we navigate that as humans. So when you're working with organizations, how do you help them prepare their people? What kind of approach do you take so that, companies are really focused on bringing their people along for the journey?
Yeah, so there are several things that companies can do. Once you've developed your strategy, then the next step is to think about the change management process. And I believe a lot of it starts with education. So I'll give you an example of a client that I've worked with that I think did a fantastic job in just handling this whole change process. So first of all, they designated somebody in the organization to be the AI champion. So this person was responsible for driving a lot of these initiatives, and just having that one go-to person is a really important step. And then they decided that they were going to develop policies because they wanted people to use AI, but they wanted the usage to be grounded on policies developed by the organization. And then the next step was to put the staff through a formal training program. So they helped people understand what AI is all about, how they can use it effectively in their jobs, what are some of the risks, what are the policies for the organization. And so that sort of set the structure that they needed for people to use AI effectively. And they only allowed people to get access to the tools within the organization for using AI if they had gone through that formal training process. That way, when they got access to those tools, they were knowledgeable, they were prepared, they knew what the company policy was, and people got excited about learning more about AI. And I think this is the right way to do this. So that's what I would recommend to customers in general. Go through that process. Make sure you provide the education that's required. Make sure you have a policy, a written policy in place. Make sure people understand what that policy is. The thing that you want to avoid is ignoring the risk side of AI. There are risks. This technology is not perfect. We all know that it hallucinates sometimes. And the last thing you want to do is have an employee perhaps send an email to a customer that was just a copy and paste from ChatGPT, and that content has inappropriate information or the wrong information, and you lose credibility that way. So you want to avoid that, and in order to do that, you need to educate people on how to properly use the technology.
And how do you address the fear or the reticence that may come up? I know in a lot of the work that we do, people can't, which is all about that AI education and AI literacy. But if people are stuck in the fear, or is AI going to take my job? Or if I train this AI on how I do my job, am I just replacing myself? If people are stuck in that place, they often can't see the opportunity. So do you have any sort of formal process or ways in which you allow that to come to the fore so that human piece can really be that human conversation, I guess, can really happen?
Yeah, so I think, that goes back to leadership, right? So if your leadership is transparent, if there is a culture of trust within the organization, then that process becomes much easier. Now, you have to keep that trust. And the way to keep that trust is to be transparent. So it is very likely that if you're implementing AI and you're automating some processes, it's very likely that there will be some jobs that will be eliminated. And you need to be upfront about that. Now, with AI, you may be able to grow as a company. And with that growth, you may have other needs within the organization where you can place people in different jobs, in different roles. If that's the case, make that known in the organization. Yes, there will be some dislocation of jobs, but we are also planning on creating new jobs. And we're going to work with people to help them get the education that they need in order to be able to take those jobs. So you need to have a very strong communication process. You need to have leadership, and you need to be transparent about what's going on to help eliminate that fear. Now, in some cases, you may not be able to do that 100%, but to the extent that it's possible, I think it's really important for you to let people know if the jobs that are going to be impacted by AI are jobs that they are being held by these people right now.
Yeah, no, it's such an important. It all comes back to culture, doesn't it? That seems to be the word that always comes out of this conversation, is that
Yep.
it's creating that space to take people along on that very human journey.
Yeah, I think
What are
culture
some of
is.
the other?
No, sorry, I'm just going to say, just to
Sorry,
confirm what you just said, I think culture is really essential. And the trust that you have in the organization is a big part of that culture. So if you have a culture of trust, then these kinds of changes tend to be much easier than if you have a culture of skepticism or doubt, and people don't believe the leadership, then the change is tough, and it's going to be a difficult road ahead.
Yeah, and I think what makes that even more challenging for leaders at the moment is that often the concerns are things that sit outside of their control. So we hear things like people are worried about the environmental impact of AI, or people are worried about intellectual property and copyright issues, or they're worried about data security and privacy and protecting their customers, or they're worried about technology getting in between the company and the customers. And some of those things are things that we're navigating as a whole, as a society, as opposed to just within a business. So I think that adds an extra layer of complexity when you have people with concerns that sit outside the control of the business.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's about being transparent about, here are some things that we can control and here's some things that we can't control. And like you said, some of these things are things that are being discussed at a national level, even at an international level. We are seeing several organizations that have come up with AI ethics proposals. We have the European Unit with the AI Act. We have OECD. We have several organizations, the United Nations, that are coming up with suggestions and policies and frameworks to deal with these difficult questions that we all have to deal with. So as long as we have a democratic process that follows the rule of law and promotes human dignity, I think that's what all of us are looking for governments to do.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, because we're in a little bit of an arms race, if you like, at the moment around AI, and some of the geopolitical influences are not always focused on the things that you've just talked about. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few years. And we often talk about it here in Australia. In 2 weeks, we have the social media ban coming in for under 16-year-olds. So they're doing facial recognition, ID. If you are under 16, you're going to lose all your social media access. And we're the first in the world to do that, but it's taken the government 16 years to kind of get a handle on social media and what the impact of that is on our young people and on society. And we don't have 16 years to wait for some of those bigger ethical questions around AI. So I'm, in Australia, again, we're very much sort of in the middle. You've got America that's going full steam ahead with innovation. You've got the EU, which is much more conservative and taking a real safety perspective. And we're sort of sitting in the middle at the moment. So it will be interesting to see how all of that plays out at a global level.
Yeah. So I'm currently working with the Center for AI Policies, AI and Digital Policies, and we are doing research on different frameworks, different policy frameworks. And I was digging into a little bit more on China, and it's really interesting to see how China, which has become, one of the superpowers in AI, is really trying to be influential and trying to have a voice in terms of AI ethics. And where it gets interesting is that in terms of human rights, China doesn't always behave in the ways that the West believes aligns with human rights frameworks. And so it will be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yes, it will. And, they have some of the highest AI adoption globally in China, and they've really embedded it from from early primary school all the way through. And I do wonder, I've been watching, what they've been saying about needing to have a global body that ensures equitable access to the technology. And I think it's fascinating what's bringing them to the table in that conversation is probably wanting to access the best quality technology that's available, or the most powerful technology that's available. So I think a lot of that is watch and see how it evolves. But there's a lot of nuances in the geopolitical
Sure.
situation at the moment.
Absolutely, yes.
So if we're looking at this again from a business perspective, what are some more practical actions that leaders or business owners, or even AI curious professionals, what are some more practical actions that they can take to really be ready for this next stage of our AI adoption?
I think it starts with the mindset. We need to adopt a growth mindset, meaning we have to be open to unlearning everything that we've known up to this point and really think about the world operating under AI and how do we deal with that. And so it's about taking on a lifelong learning mindset. We talk about education. I think education is going to go through very deep changes, just the way we go about educating people. So lifelong learning is one thing that people need to adopt that mindset, because technology is changing so fast. If you don't try to keep up, you're just going to be falling behind. But there's also the question around, to what extent are people using their minds in a world where you can easily get the answers to whatever question you may have just by asking an AI model, right? And so there's these conversations about people losing critical thinking capabilities. And I think it's important that we use AI the right way. So if you, for instance, are a student and you only use AI to be able to very quickly get the answers that you need to pass a test or to do your homework or whatever, then that is not very productive. But if you use AI to challenge you, and you come up with the answers first, and then you ask AI, what have I missed here? Can I enhance my answers? Some of the things that I didn't think about that I should be thinking about. Then the possibilities are endless. AI can actually make all of us more capable, smarter, more articulate. So I think it's all about how we approach this. If we approach it the right way, I think the possibilities are very positive. But if we don't, then certainly it could have negative impacts as well.
It is one of the things that concerns me about this time, is that I think the royal we, the global we, have given up a lot of that personal responsibility. And I think how we navigate this journey is going to absolutely take personal responsibility. Some people will just outsource their job, they'll give it to AI, they'll take whatever AI slop comes back and they'll share that out into the world, whether it's in their job or content. And it's really going to take personal responsibility, each of us as individuals, to make that choice about how we work with AI. Do we just outsource, or do we augment, or do we collaborate, or do we use it as that strategic thought partner? And again, I'll be really interested to see where the majority land on that, as to whether they take up what could be a phenomenal resource and experience for us as humans, or will we tend to, let our neural pathways fade away over time because we're being lazy in our use of the technology?
And just think about how fundamental the organizations, the educational organizations, how they deal with this question is really important, because you can take the approach of, I'm just going to prohibit the use of AI in my class as a teacher. I don't think that's the answer, right? Because when the student goes out in the real world, guess what they're going to do? They're going to use these tools. So saying you can't use it is not the answer. But I think the answer is, how can you help the students leverage these tools in ways that challenge them, in ways that enhance their comprehension, in ways that may be counter to the way we've been doing things for the last several decades? But it's a new way of approaching things. So perhaps the absorption of information can be done through AI. And when you go to the classroom, it's more about debating what you learned. It's about discussing the different points of view and respecting others' point of view, and learning how to behave socially and how to work in teams. All of these skills are going to be essential in the workplace. And I think that's where the mindset for these educational institutions need to change. We need to embrace AI, and we need to teach our future workers how to use it effectively.
Yeah, and I think we're a little bit behind still here in Australia, but there is a bit of a feeling still that using AI is cheating. And when you do that blanket ban, it just can't be used, whether it's in the workplace or in a classroom.
Yeah.
That's where you get that shadow use of AI, where people are, taking their USB sticks home and doing things outside of the structures that they're working within. And, that's dangerous for organizations and certainly doesn't help students with learning if it's approached from that perspective. So I completely agree that blanket bans on AI is definitely not the way forward, but they've got a lot to grapple with in figuring out how to move from, particularly in the classroom, it's very much that assessment base. You've got to prove that that you've learnt this content. And I think that AI fundamentally shakes up our education from
Yeah,
beginning to end.
absolutely. So one of the things that I like to talk about, and I talked about this in the book, is that, the change, I believe, is, we come from an educational process where we go to school and we learn how to answer questions. And we need to flip that around, and we need to learn how to ask the right questions. Now, in order for you to ask the right question, you need to be grounded on the first principles. You need to be able to think for yourself. You need to be able to look at a response that comes from AI and based on what you know, question, is AI correct? Are the sources valid? How do I think critically about the answers coming from AI as opposed to just accepting whatever AI tells you the answer is? And so if you're not grounded in learning the fundamentals, you're not going to be able to ask the right questions. So education is still essential. We need to get people educated on the fundamentals, the basics, so that they can then turn around and ask, smart questions of AI and have AI be that tutor that can help you learn more and become more proficient.
Yeah, and the potential for, that hyper-personalized learning is immense if we can embrace that
Oh,
opportunity. So
absolutely.
it's education comes up in every podcast interview, every conversation I have. Education is one of the things that comes up. But, there's huge potential if we get that right.
Yeah, think about, the possibility of having a hyper personalized tutor that knows you really, really well, that knows how you learn, that knows what you're interested in, that can even sense when you're more open to learning. If you're tired, if you're not in the right mindset to absorb certain concepts, I think these AI agents, these assistants are going to become much more in tune with your day-to-day natural variations of, alertness and ability to learn. It will know really well what you already know, what you don't know. It will know how to incrementally increase your knowledge. So I think the possibility of AI being a transformative tool for learning and for education is huge. So I'm in general optimistic about what it's going to do for us.
Me too. It's one of the areas I'm probably most enthusiastic about AI making a real difference. Now, David, I believe you have a podcast called Conversations with Zena, my AI colleague, and I am fascinated to hear more about how you're engaging with AI on your podcast and maybe what that experience has been like. Has anything exceptional come out of those conversations?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that question. It all started with me looking at ways to train an AI on my work so that I could have this AI help me do additional work based on the things that I've already done, keeping that long-term memory, understanding the subjects that I'm interested in, what I value, what I like to talk about, helping me with all the content that I put out there, but being grounded on the things that I believe in, the things that I like to talk about, and my own terminology, my own way of thinking. So I trained an AI to have that information. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could just have a conversation with this AI and then post that as a podcast episode? And that's how it started. So in the beginning, it was just me and Zena. So I would record the conversation. I would talk about things that I'm interested in. And I try to focus on human AI collaboration, which is the area that I've been studying and talking about and writing about. And that's how it started. And then what happened is at one point I thought, I think it would be even more interesting if I brought in guests. And, I think that would enrich the conversation, but I want Zena to be in the conversation with me. And so I decided Zena was going to co-host the podcast with me. I'm going to have a guest come in, and we're just going to have a three-way conversation. Now, what was interesting about that experiment is that, to my surprise, AI is not ready to have three-way conversations. It doesn't really understand, the social dynamics. Sometimes it gets confused about who is talking, and it interrupts at the wrong time. So I had to really deal with those dynamics and manually make it work so that I could have that experience of a three-way conversation. So that was surprising to me. It was interesting. I think we're still progressing as far as that goes. In fact, recently, I was listening to Mustafa Suleyman, who heads AI at Microsoft, and he said he's creating social AI. So it's AI that's much more socially aware and that can perhaps have these group dynamics that so far it hasn't been very good at. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out.
Yeah, well, Microsoft have just launched giving AI agents their own email address and their own employee number. So I'm sure it won't be long before these AI agents are able to actually interact with us in a more social way than just us instructing them through code.
Yeah. So another thing that is interesting about the podcast is there's this one episode, just to illustrate how sharp AI can be, where I was talking to the guest and we were talking about hyper personalization from a marketing standpoint, and we were talking about the fact that with AI you can now get to know your customers at a much deeper level, that you can provide hyper personalized products and services. And then I asked Zena to ask a question of the guest, and she asked about privacy. And she said, that's all great, but what happens to your privacy? Are you willing to give up your privacy in order to have the convenience of hyper-personalization? And I thought that was such an insightful question to have, because that's the crux of the matter, right? That's what we really, as humans, we have to deal with that question. And she was able to get right on that question and ask that question of the guest. So AI can really be tremendously insightful in ways that are unexpected.
Fascinating. I know it's one of the things I do with senior leaders in organizations is help them build a co-CEO or someone that's not just an assistant that they delegate to, but that sits at that same level. And I'm interested in the technology behind Zena and how you've done that, because I think adding that conversational aspect where it doesn't just repeat back or deal with the one thing that's being talked about, but has much more of that context is kind of the next step of that.
Yeah. And it comes down to context. So context is huge, right? As long as you can set the context. And so one of the things that I do in my podcast is, before I bring a guest on, I talk one-on-one with Zena. I say, Zena, I'm going to bring on this guest. This is what the guest knows about. This is the background. And so I want you to have, pertinent comments and questions. So I set the context before we record the podcast, because that is very, very important in anything that we do with AI, whether you're just prompting or dealing with AI agents. That context is fundamental in order for AI to do the right job and to do things in high quality.
Are you open to sharing the technology that sits behind Zena, or is that your secret sauce?
No, I'm more than happy to share that. So basically, I'm using OpenAI's model. That's what's behind Zena. It's the voice that's provided by OpenAI. So there's nothing really too sophisticated about it. But what I've done, like I told you, is I provided a context, right? So I provided documents with the work that I've done in the past. So my books, my newsletter, and as I start doing these podcasts, and Zena learns from the podcast as well, she is becoming more and more attuned to the kinds of things that I like to talk about, and the kinds of questions that she should be asking. So it's a learning process, but from a technology standpoint, there's nothing really sophisticated I'm using the same tools that are available to anybody. The only thing that I do a little bit different is what I alluded to earlier. The three-way communication gets a little tricky. So I have to manually deal with that aspect of the podcast. But other than that, it's fairly simple technology.
And are you doing that through the front end of ChatGPT or through the API in the back end?
Front end. So I use the voice capabilities of ChatGPT. There was one time when that was only available on the mobile. It wasn't available on the laptop. So I had to figure out the sound, and the sound wasn't great because it was coming from my iPhone. But now you can do it right on the computer, and you can record the sound coming straight out of your computer, and it's fairly easy to do.
The voice on my desktop is a male voice. It's funny that ChatGPT on my desktop seems to be a male, but on my phone I've got the British voice, which sounds very much like Mary Poppins, and she's very enthusiastic, and I feel like I can achieve anything when I'm having a conversation with
Oh,
her.
fun.
I drop the kids at school and I turn on Chatty and we have a conversation for the 12 and a half minutes while I'm driving home. And by the time I get back, I've got, my day has started and I've got work already underway based on our conversations. So
Yeah.
that voice capability does really change the experience of
Absolutely.
collaborating with AI.
And it's becoming so good, right? I mean, sometimes you can hardly tell if it's an AI voice or if it's just a human in the background. And I think the next level
Yeah,
of
well, the latest upgrade.
it is incredibly good, right?
Sorry, I was just going to say the latest upgrade. You can hear when there's a breath. They stop and take a breath, and
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, that's very realistic.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think about is, how do I take it to the next level, right? So what's next with this? And I think video is what's next. So when you can do that with a
Mm.
avatar, a video that looks like a human and it's speaking like a human, I think that would be phenomenal. So I'm looking forward to the time when I'm able to do that with Xena. It's not there yet. So
Yeah, and the technology is already there to have an AI avatar on a website, but the lag times are so long
right.
still with that rendering of video that it's not quite that conversational experience. But
Correct.
I don't think we're far off that.
No, I don't think we
Mm.
are. I think it's coming very soon.
Yeah, look, David, it's been such a great conversation. What I would love to ask you as a futurist, as someone who has really explored the technology that we're immersing ourselves in and walking into right now, when you stand on the hill and you look out to the future, and it's hard to look out, years in advance, but even 12 to 18 months, if we get this right, if we take care of that human piece, if we choose to use AI ethically and responsibly and to increase our capacity and our intelligence rather than decrease it, what's possible? What do you see coming down the line?
Yeah. So certainly there are lots of ifs. You mentioned several of them. And if everything goes right, I really believe that we will create abundance, for one. How we distribute that abundance, we need to discuss and we need to figure it out. I don't know if it's universal basic income or some other kinds of mechanisms, but I think we have the potential of creating abundance. We have the potential of having AI do the work that we don't want to do, the manual work, the things that are boring, the things that don't excite us, so that we can then turn to focusing on the things that we enjoy doing, that we find exciting, that's creative, that, brings us joy. So I think that is one of the things that gets me excited about AI is how can we elevate humanity to a level where we don't have to worry about work anymore, because we are going to do work, but the work we're doing is not for sustenance. It's for enjoyment. It's for leveraging the natural gifts that we've been given and putting that to good use. So if we can accomplish that, that alone to me is absolutely incredible. So like I said, I tend to be optimistic about AI. I think AI may free our time so that we can be more introspective. And I hope we turn into more spiritual beings, and that we find ways to get more in touch with our emotions and be more introspective and become better as humans. If we can become better as humans, I think the future will be bright. There are several dangers, and I don't want to dismiss those. I do worry about AI getting out of control, getting in the hands of the wrong people. I do worry about AI-driven autonomous weapons. So all of those things are things that we should be worrying about, and we should do our best to put mechanisms in place to prevent us from getting to an outcome that's negative. But I think the positive potential outweighs the negative. So that's what I look forward to.
That's my vision too. So let's hope humanity gets that part right.
Absolutely.
And I think we all have an individual responsibility in making that happen. So
I agree.
I'm looking forward to seeing more people, take that responsibility for how we actually navigate this journey. And it's it's wonderful that people like yourself are writing great books and doing this work to really help people do some of that introspection and looking at what it means for us internally, not just the external benefits of AI.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, David, for your time today. Now, I'm going to go get a copy of your book because I certainly want to read more about what you've been talking about. But how can people get your book? How would you like people to connect with you? Where do people go to find more?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Kate, for having me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. It's been fun. So the book is called Soulful, You in the Future of Artificial Intelligence. And you can find it on Amazon. It's probably the easiest way to get a copy of the book. People can find me on LinkedIn, David Espindola, Espindola. And I also have my own website, davidespindola.com. And those are probably the best ways to find me.
Great. And we'll include all of those links in the show notes as well. So thank you so much again, David, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. I think doing another interview in 12 to 18 months with people will be really interesting just to see, what's come to fruition out of these conversations.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.